Mercedes Mone's tenure in All Elite Wrestling, AEW, has been a roller coaster of highs and lows, sparking passionate discussions among fans, critics, and analysts alike. Since her arrival, she's delivered unforgettable moments, showcasing her in-ring prowess and star power. But there's an undeniable issue that continues to plague her run as the TBS champion: a lack of credible challengers. This recurring theme has left many questioning the direction of her booking and what AEW must do to right the ship for one of its biggest stars. While Mone has a legion of devoted supporters who celebrate her every move, there are also doubters and detractors who point to inconsistencies in her presentation and the creative decisions surrounding her title reign. In this exploration, we'll dive deep into what AEW is doing wrong with Mercedes Mone, why it's holding her back, and how they can turn things around to maximize her potential and elevate the women's division as a whole. Let's start with the timeline of Mone's journey in AEW. She made her explosive debut and quickly ascended to the top of the women's division, capturing the TBS championship from Willow Nightingale at Double or Nothing 2024. It was a defining moment that signaled her intent to dominate, and since then, she's held the title with an iron grip, racking up a reign that, as of this discussion on March 11, 2025, has lasted 300 days. Over the course of this championship run, she's defended the title multiple times across television and pay-per-view events, facing a variety of opponents with differing levels of success and fanfare. On paper, her resume looks impressive. She's gone toe-to-toe with the likes of Nyla Rose, Hikaru Shida, Sky Blue, and Britt Baker, delivering matches that range from solid to exceptional. Her feud with Britt Baker, in particular, stands out as a high point, culminating in a memorable clash at All In that showcased her ability to shine against top-tier talent. Similarly, her program with Chris Statlander produced standout encounters at Full Gear and World's End, matches that demonstrated her capacity to tell compelling stories in the ring while putting on technical clinics. However, despite these highlights, there's a persistent undercurrent of dissatisfaction with how Mone has been utilized. For every marquee matchup against a Britt Baker or a Chris Statlander, there's a string of defenses against opponents who, frankly, don't measure up to her level, at least not in the eyes of the audience or in the context of AEW's storytelling. Names like Queen Aminata, Emi Sakura, Harley Cameron, Yuka Sakazaki, and Momo Watanabe have filled out her title defense record. And while some of these matches have been entertaining, they share a glaring commonality: none of these challengers have been presented as legitimate threats to Mone's reign. This pattern has become increasingly apparent in her most recent outings. On January 29, TH's episode of Dynamite, she defeated Yuka Sakazaki in a match that, while competently wrestled, lacked any real stakes. Then, on February 15 at Grand Slam, she faced Harley Cameron, a likable character with a hometown connection that justified her inclusion, but someone who didn't come across as a believable contender for the TBS championship. The tipping point, however, came at Revolution, where Mone defended her title against Momo Watanabe in an 18-minute bout that, despite its quality, failed to ignite the crowd. The match with Momo is a microcosm of the broader issue. Momo, a talented wrestler in her own right, isn't a full-time AEW roster member, and her inclusion stemmed from Mone's personal request to work with her. While it's commendable that Mone wants to elevate international talent and showcase her versatility, the decision backfired in terms of narrative impact. Fans in attendance didn't buy Momo as a viable threat, and the lack of investment was palpable. Even as the match built to near falls and Momo mounted a comeback, the slower moments exposed a disconnect. There was no urgency, no belief that the title could change hands. This wasn't a reflection of Momo's ability or Mone's performance. Rather, it was a symptom of poor booking. Momo hadn't been built up as a credible challenger in AEW's ecosystem, and without that foundation, the match felt like a foregone conclusion. The same can be said for Harley Cameron, Yuka Sakazaki, Queen Aminata, and others. These women, while skilled, haven't been positioned as stars capable of dethroning Mone, and that predictability is starting to drag her down. Contrast this with Mone's earlier feuds. Her program with Britt Baker worked because Baker was an established name with a track record of success, someone the audience could see as a genuine rival. The same applies to Chris Statlander, whose physicality and prior accomplishments made her a compelling foil, even if their rematch at World's End lacked the freshness of their Full Gear encounter. These opponents brought believability to the table, a sense that Mone's title reign could be in jeopardy. But when you look at her last three defenses against Yuka Sakazaki, Harley Cameron, and Momo Watanabe, the pattern shifts. These matches, while technically sound, don't carry the same weight. The fans know Mone isn't losing to these challengers, and that certainty robs the contests of drama. It's not just about the result, it's about the journey. A great wrestling story thrives on tension, on the possibility of an upset, and AEW has failed to deliver that with Moné's recent opponents. This isn't to say Mone hasn't been putting in the work. Her in-ring performances have been consistently excellent, often elevating her opponents and delivering matches that stand out on any card. Since transitioning from a babyface to a heel, her promos have sharpened, her character has deepened, and her presence has grown more commanding. She's addressed many of the criticisms that greeted her early AEW run, evolving into a polished act that justifies her status as a marquee signing. The problem lies not with Mone herself, but with the creative direction surrounding her. A champion is only as strong as their challengers, and when those challengers lack credibility, it diminishes the title's prestige and the champion's aura. Mone is out there having banger matches, as the fans like to say, but if the outcome is never in doubt, those matches lose their staying power. They become showcases rather than stories, and that's a disservice to both Mone and the women she's facing. So where does the blame lie? Part of it falls on Moné's shoulders. She's a veteran who likely has some influence over her direction, but the bulk of the responsibility rests with AEW's booking team, led by Tony Khan. Wrestling is a collaborative art form, and while performers can elevate material, they're ultimately at the mercy of the stories they're given. Khan and his agents have leaned too heavily on a formula of long title reigns for the TBS Championship, a trend that's evident when you examine its history. Jade Cargill held it for 8 days in a short, experimental reign, but Chris Statlander, 174 days, Julia Hart, 155 days, and now Mone, 300 days, have established a pattern of extended dominance. Willow Nightingale's 35-day stint was an anomaly, a transitional reign designed to bridge the gap between Hart and Mone. Long reigns can work, look at Roman Reigns in WWE, but they require dynamic storytelling and credible challengers to sustain momentum. For Mone, that momentum has stalled because her opponents aren't being built up as stars in their own right. Take the Toni Storm and Mariah May feud as a counterexample. Widely regarded as the greatest women's storyline in AEW history, it succeeded because both competitors were presented as equals. They traded wins. Storm beat May, then May beat Storm at Revolution, creating a sense of unpredictability that kept fans invested. Every match felt like it could go either way, and that parity elevated both women and the AEW Women's World Championship they were fighting over. Moné's TBS title defenses, by contrast, lack that balance. There's no one in her orbit who feels like they could take the belt from her, and after 300 days, that's a problem. It's not enough to have great matches, there needs to be a stakes-driven narrative, and AEW hasn't provided one. This issue is compounded by broader problems in the women's division. AEW boasts a talented roster: Willow Nightingale, Britt Baker, Toni Storm, Hikaru Shida, Chris Statlander, and others have the potential to be cornerstone players, but they're underutilized. With 4 hours of weekly television across Dynamite and Collision, plus lengthy pay-per-views that often feature 13 to 15 matches, there's ample time to showcase the women. Yet, women's matches remain sparse, typically limited to 1 or 2 per show. This scarcity makes it harder to build contenders organically. If someone like Harley Cameron or Yuka Sakazaki had been given consistent wins and storylines leading up to their title shots, their challenges might have felt more meaningful. Instead, they're thrown into the mix with little build-up, leaving Mone to carry the load against opponents the audience isn't primed to care about. The solution lies in a multi-pronged approach. First, AEW needs to invest in its mid-card women, giving them feuds and victories that establish them as threats. Imagine if Queen Aminata had a winning streak on Collision, or if Emi Sakura was booked as a grizzled veteran with a point to prove. These small steps could transform them from filler challengers into legitimate contenders. Second, Mone needs a signature rival, someone who can match her star power and push her to new heights. Britt Baker filled that role early on, but with that chapter closed, AEW should look to someone like Toni Storm, post Mariah May, or a returning Jamie Hayter to step up.